In ancient Egypt, a mix of honey and cannabis would be ground up and inserted directly into the baby maker to deal with cramps. Have you tried that? Let me know. Down to try that as well. The early Greeks used plants like motherwort to help with anxiety and period pain. And fun fact, people still use motherwort today to help with menopause. Natural remedies like this continued through the Middle Ages when women turned to things like lemon and caraway seeds to help with the pain. Native Americans used the root of a plant called black cohosh as a sedative and reliever of menstrual issues. This too eventually made its way into Western medicine. But for hundreds of years, the best solution on the market was opium. Yeah. From the Greeks to the Benedictine monks, this drug made from the seeds of poppy plants was used all over the world, and this shit worked, okay? It was so strong and effective that a synthetic version of opium shows up in drugs all over the world today in things like heroin and oxycodone. So that's how the situation that was going on inside the body were handled. But what was happening outside the body? What about that? You know, periods aren't just about cramps, headaches. There's blood, right? Great. And sometimes there's lots of it. So what did they do? How did they handle the situation? I like to break this down into 2 time periods, pre and post the invention of tampons. Welcome to the pre-tampon era. Have you ever heard of the Greek philosopher Hypatia? Well, she's a badass. And she's also considered the first female mathematician. You go, girl. But there's a story that says a man was bothering the hell out of her, okay? And he would not leave her alone. He was just bugging her. So what did she do? Well, she happened to be on her period, and she took off her menstrual cloth and threw it at him. Very effective. Now, this story tells us a couple of things. 1, our girl could stand up for herself. And 2, Roman women probably used cloth to soak up menstrual blood. Historians also know that around this time, African and Australian women were making bandages made of grass and vegetable fiber for the same reasons. Yeah, grass and vegetable fiber. Ouch. I just feel like that would chafe. So in addition to menstrual cloths, the Middle Ages brought all kinds of things to help hide the fact that women were on their period. Because remember, this is the Idle Ages, and shame is all the rage. Some women would carry around little bags of sweet-smelling herbs to counteract the smell of the situation. One of the more unique beliefs at the time drove some women to burn a toad and wear the ashes around their waist to ease a heavy flow. This is a situation. What? How? How did they get to that conclusion? I am going to burn a toad and wear the ashes around my waist to help with my period. That's wild. Burn a toad, put the ash. I don't know. Back then you had to get creative, and that's what they settled on, and it worked for them. From then until the 1800s, women all over the world would simply walk around wearing rags of various types. And you've heard that term. When someone is on the rag, that's what it comes from, because literally women were using different types of rags. But later in the 1800s, ladies started putting rubber in their underwear to collect blood. Step 1, find rubber. You gotta get a toad, you gotta get rubber. I mean, we really are wizards. We are wizards with this shit. We make shit disappear because we put it up there. It's like, they would get rubber, put it in the underwear, collect blood. Great. Now, this is the first example of what we would know today as a menstrual cup. So through the 1880s, women all over the world were doing it for themselves, like super DIY. They had to come up with it themselves, you get it. The Museum of Menstruation, yes, real place, road trip, let's go, said women used to make their own pads, and some were even washable, but that tended to be a little bit more expensive. So most women just used their clothes to absorb the blood, which was easier to do back then because they had petticoats and bigger dresses to cover everything up underneath. Doesn't mean it was comfortable, but it worked. I think they should go back to the toad idea. I'm really into that one. Kind of want to try it. And up until 1925, some women in the United States would wear this thing that resembled a diaper. It was made of flannel and was uncomfortable as hell. Still, what other option did they have? So they washed it and reused it. They reused this like diaper thing. That was your only option. You had no other option. What are you supposed to do? You get frowned on if you bleed all over the place, but there's no good option. Yeah, anyways, sometimes I think we should just all get together. We should all just stop wearing pads and stuff and just free bleed everywhere and just ruin everyone's day. And maybe then we could get something like, I don't know, a day off. Who's with me? Woo! I'll get the toads. Toad party. Okay, so not only did these women have to continually wash their bloody clothes, they had to hide the fact that they were even on their period. Because remember, it's gross and it's shameful, and you're a woman. You're being pressured into believing that women who hid their menstruation were more ladylike, more hygienic, right? She doesn't bleed. That's not a thing. No. So women have this fear of discovery deeply ingrained. And maybe you feel it now, because I remember back in like middle school when everyone was getting their periods, it was so embarrassing. Like you didn't want anybody to know and you were trying to be so quiet. Why are we so fucked up? I don't know. And as we have learned on the series, fear can be used to make people a lot of money. Cha-ching! By the end of the 1800s, there were a bunch of concerns about bacteria and if women were cleaning their reusable menstrual cloth appropriately. So this created what we know today as the feminine hygiene market. So between 1854 and 1915, 20 patents were filed for menstrual products. This included the first formal menstrual cups and something called Lister's towels, which actually paved the way for maxi pads. So there were also these things called Hoosier belts. It was a pad that was attached to a belt that women wore around their waist. And these belts kept the pad in place. And some of this stuff was just sold door to door, like knock, knock, hello, who's there? Hi, miss. Perfect stranger, but I want to talk about your vagina. And thankfully, menstrual products started to be advertised in catalogs around the 1890s. Now, around this time specifically, 1896, Johnson & Johnson was manufacturing sanitary napkins. I hate that word more than anything. Sanitary napkins. Shut the fuck up. But they were taken off the market because advertising something like this was considered socially immoral. Shame, shame, shame. Then, during World War I, French nurses found out that bandages used to stop soldiers from bleeding out and dying could actually be used for women while they're on their period. I mean, they were super absorbent. And these bandages were made of a wood pulp called cellucotton. So these cloth diapers and all those rags were like on their way out. And the timing for all these developments was perfect because more women were entering the workforce and they didn't want to lose out on jobs by staying home, bleeding, you know. So this is when attitudes about menstrual products started to change. It was no longer about hiding women away during their period. Companies had to figure out a way to keep them involved and productive. And in 1927, along came a woman named Lillian Gilbreth. She was a pioneering psychologist and industrial engineer hired by Johnson & Johnson to study how to sell feminine hygiene products. Now, after interviewing thousands of women, she learned a ton about size, fit, and preferences. Most products were too large with like rigid edges, and most ladies preferred smaller, discreet packaging because we're embarrassed. Her work inspired marketing campaigns centered on young women maintaining their innocence while separating menstruation from sex. It also positioned menstrual products as something that allows girls to continue active lifestyles. Lillian's findings were used by companies to overcome public perception that menstrual products were embarrassing. And thank God, okay? And a lot of her work forged the way into a post-tampon world. On October 15th, 1937, a historic day in American history, not even in world history, the Tampax company introduced the tampon to the world. This should be a national holiday, shouldn't it? I think it should. And now we have arrived to the post-tampon world. So I had to Google really quick, were tampons made by a man or a woman? Because I was just curious, tampons were made by a man, but the company Tampax, woman-owned. The ad was geared toward active ladies aged 13 to 45, and it had a very medical vibe to establish a certain amount of trust. But what this ad also did was lean into something women have been craving forever: independence. And word of mouth spread like wildfire. But like all revolutions, there was opposition, because the idea of a woman touching herself, it honestly scared the shit out of people. Even if it's just to place a tampon up there so she can go on about her day, it was like, ooh, can she do that? We don't know. That's a little weird. Now, before we go further, it's worth mentioning that early versions of tampons were documented in Europe as early as 17 and 1800s, but they weren't specifically geared to menstruation. In the late 1800s, a gynecologist described 8 particular uses for a tampon. The very last thing on the list: the absorption of vaginal and uterine discharges. But with the invention of the modern tampon, it jumped to number 1 use. So tampons are crushing it. They're like, yeah, we're here, we're absorbing, fuck yeah. And in 1969, a company called Stay Free brought a game-changing version to the maxi pad to the market. Now, maxi pads are just another term for that nasty word sanitary napkins or menstrual pads. So this company didn't invent them per se, but Stay Free had the bright idea to add adhesive strips to help secure the pad in place. Oh yeah, no more like diapers and belts and hoo-haws, you just place and go. Shortly after this, in 1972, variations of the pad were created to address things like heavy and light flow. Then, in the 1980s, we started to see the modern maxi pad along with pads that had wings, all the whoos and hoo-ha, shoo-da, ooh, love it. It's just, there's so many options now. The popularity of pads and tampons only increased as time went on, and the products continued to evolve. But along with these developments came some darker things that were both toxic and shocking.